Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And this episode is sponsored by Nightwolf. Born into the outcast breed of werewolves known as the Monokai, 18-year-old Rodney Marcelli is reluctantly pulled into an ancient war between good and evil during a modern time when the line has blurred. With the help of Snowfall, the pure-blooded Monokai, and the supernatural evil player Night Hunter, Rod must learn to master his newly crowned lycanthropy and mysterious kinetic energy powers that only he possesses. Rod must fight the Dark Covenant in order to avenge his friends and family and to save the girl he loves, Master Vampire Lord Malice. Rodney Marcelli is Nightwolf. Nightwolf is available live on Kickstarter through May 11th from the creator teams of Rob Matari, Mogpar, Carlos Lorena, and Gat Melvin. Join the Wolf Pack by backing the Kickstarter today at lonewolfcomics.com/Nightwolf. And enough about that, though. And I think, Rob is a friend of yours. Enough about Rob, though, because it's about you. I would be smart.
We can talk about other people. I don't care. I don't have that big of an ego. Hi.
No, but welcome back to the show. And you currently have a Kickstarter that actually just launched. I think you're 40% funded as we sit right now. And it's Sex Night. It's a fun book, but what is the basic premise of Sex Night for those who are hearing about it everybody's pretty much going to be hearing about it for the first time who's watching. So
this premise. I mean, I don't think I put out a book that's had a simpler premise than this. It's basically a married couple tries and fails at having sex because they're married and they've been doing it for a long time and they suck at it. It's pretty much that's the only thing that, like, the more you go on with somebody, the worse off it gets, because you just you become numb to I guess having sex with the same person over and over again. So that's kind of what the book is about.
Yeah, let's actually talk about this because it's interesting. Because I thought it was funny when you pitched me the idea, and then I did a little research, and obviously things happen when you get married. It starts off, I think, fun. I'm not married yet. I'm still single, but I would imagine that it's somewhat fun. And then when you have kids and work gets involved and other things happen, being, married and just being intimate becomes complicated. And so how did this all even come about? Because it seems simple, but I haven't seen a book like this in a while.
How did this come about? Well, I was trying to be intimate with my own wife. I find out that some point in times we're trying to be serious, and sexy, and then we just make each other laugh because we know all each other's moves. So it's like, it's just become everything about it. There's no mystery anymore. It's become mundane. So I was just thinking of, like, taking all of these individual moments that are funny or that could possibly be funny or that I could think of and just cramming them all into a single night, just trying to make it very hyperized, and all of the little funny nuances where sometimes you're intimate with somebody who you're very friendly with. And I was like, ha, ha, ha. I just felt like supercharging all of those into a single sex session. So that's kind of how the idea came about. And I like following my own muse. I like challenging myself. So when an idea pops into my head that's kind of different, that's kind of unique or original, that like sparks that writer drive in me, I just kind of run with it,
Yeah, and obviously, it's just a fun book. I think it's a one-shot, right?
So far, I never really planned that far ahead. For the most part, this is a one-shot. It's one isolated story, but I could go on with it forever, I had an idea of doing a book called Not Sex Night, which is all the times that, like, we try to start something up and it just fizzles out and just nothing ever happens.
So let's actually dive into this, though, because I don't want to ruin too much of the story. Obviously, it's very funny, it's very comedic, and there's a lot of moments. And obviously, as I stated, I'm not married, I'm still single, but I would imagine that it's extremely relatable in a lot of ways from what I understand about relationships. And so what is this like? Because it is very much a slice of life type of comic book. And I think it's capturing that realm. And as I stated before, it's an area that's lacking in comics, I feel. And so what is that like to even hit that niche? Because I think people are starved for this type of content.
I talk about this on the Kickstarter a little bit. Sex is very prevalent in comics, but I feel like it's a fantasized version of sex. It's kind of catering to that fanboy ideology of the perfect framed woman with the big chest, and we're gonna do a whole bunch of covers with her naked for shooting a gun for some weird reason. And I kind of wanted to ground that. I wanted to humble that notion and be like, that's not what sex is like. Sex is like trying to make out with your wife and she farts in the middle of it because she had some bad dinner. It's just, I wanted to ground it more in reality rather than have some fantasized version of it where fanboys can just Google over big boobies. That's not my experience.
Yeah, to even go further into that, I mean, I find that obviously this is very hyperized sex, and obviously we have the whole bagel art thing, but that's not based in realism, and your book is in a lot of ways. And that's something that, and also I think that sex is very artistic sometimes, and I feel like comics have been lacking that. You look at something like, I'm trying to think of a book that's a good example. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but a lot of it is, as you were stating, extremely fantasized. And I feel like they're just trying to push the line for their audience versus what it's really like. And this is why people like Pat Chan, I feel, are killing it right now with things like Cheeky and Steamy. And it seems to me that there's a big audience that wants this and then is willing to spend real money for it. And you kind of fit into that niche a little bit and you're hitting that button, I feel, in a lot of ways. And it's really interesting because I think 5 years ago that couldn't even happen on Kickstarter, and now it is happening.
I think of Matt Hawkins at Top Cow. I've been doing a couple books like this. He had a book, Swing, that was all about a married couple that was trying to swing for the first time. And I think he's into portraying sex in a realistic and healthy way. And then you have stuff like Sex Criminals, which was a very fun, funny book. But again, comics, I think, inherently push towards that supernatural realm, that kind of fantastical. Even something like sex, even if it's not putting it up there as like supermodel billboard sex, even if they try to ground it in some sort of realism, Sex Criminals has a twist to it, some other thing to take it into that world of fantasy and supernatural. This doesn't do any of that. It pulls back the Wizard of Oz curtain and reveals it for the ugly truth that it is.
And to even go further, because I did read half of it, your book. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm looking forward to reading the other half, but I was pressed for time, in all honesty. But it's also,
forget about the supernatural thing, because in the end, she gets possessed by a ghost, and then he turns into a demon, and then they do it like that, and it's very it becomes an allegory for religion. And no, I'm just kidding.
It's a new interpretation of Beauty and the Beast.
Exactly.
Hey, we got to be creative here. But even to go further into this, one of the things is that this is very much based in relationship as well. And that's something that I think that is also lacking heavy in comics. That's what I really like about your book in particular. And what I've read of it is that, to me, it's all based in realism. It's based in reality. And it's not, and I think that comics have swung a little too far bad girl art in a lot of ways, too far horror, supernatural. And it's nice to see it kind of swing back a little bit. And I have a feeling it's going to swing heavy back the other way, and then hopefully it'll be in the middle. But what is that like? Because, as I stated, it's kind of a slice of life in a certain way, and it's capturing a very particular short night, per se, but it's focusing on that. And that's something that I feel comics sometimes miss.
I mean, the story itself, I would say it doesn't have a big, grand character arc. Like they say when you write a story that there has to be a journey. The character in the beginning has to be different than the character at the end, which is not necessarily true with this story, but you can see right from the beginning, you're jumping into this couple's relationship. You know, you can tell right away that they have a whole history together. They have a past. And even though it's unspoken, it's there, and you feel it through their dialogue and through their actions. So yeah, it's definitely a slice of life relationship piece, even though we don't touch upon that, even though they don't go to like marriage counseling and they grow and they change and evolve. You can still see through this isolated incident you get a glimpse, a peek of their relationship, which you can just see is multi-layered, even though we don't pull those layers back.
Yeah, what is that? Like, I don't know if you've ever read the comic where it was a 1-page comic, and it starts off with the character just reading you, and as you go from the first panel to the second to the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and then the seventh, eighth, and ninth, the character starts panicking because as you're about to turn the page, the character is going to die, and that's the end of the story. It's a brilliant comic. It's 9 panels, and this is similar to that, where, you know, we don't necessarily get evolution, but we have a story going on, and it's so micro focused, and it's a real art, I feel, to be able to go that deep into, I don't know how long their night lasts, but clearly we're talking maybe like an hour at the most.
Being generous, the book lasts about 45 seconds. You could blow through it. What happens is before you start reading, you get very, very excited, and you get to page 3 and it's over. That's how it works. I'll put it to you this way. So the book is 23 pages long. 22 of them take place in the same room. It's all in the bedroom. So it's not like we don't even get a different location. It's just, that's it. You enter the bedroom, you stay in the bedroom. And that's what the book is about. So you really it's really a sex night. The
point I'm getting at is that it's a real skill to be able to, I guess, focus on dialogue right in a single, you know, set, for lack of a better word, focus on legitly a single goal. I mean, it's nice to see something that, for lack of a better word, it's simple. I mean, I don't know how many comics you read, but you'll read a book and there's way too much shit going on in that book. And I understand that somebody's trying to like build the second, third, fourth and plant seeds, but I'm like, you overthrew everything in the kitchen sink, and then they get to issue 2 and it's a letdown.
Comics is tough. It's storytelling in general is a balancing act between the action and the drama. And sometimes you see comics that are just, there's so much stuff going on. They do that a lot with like Marvel and DC big universe event books, where it's just so many characters and they're all doing different things, and you're like, I'm lost. I don't know where I'm going. And then you got books that are on the other end where it's just people talking for like 10 pages straight, and it's just a huge conversation. So in a book like this that takes place in a single room, has 2 characters, I had to be very careful as to actually make things happen while also keeping the dialogue going at the same time. It has to happen continuously. And a lot of the dialogue, not all of it, but a lot of it was lifted from interactions that I had with my wife. I was like, and while I'm scripting the book or coming up with ideas for it, we would be in bed and I would just be like, hold on. I got to write this down. This is perfect. She's like, what are you doing right now? Hi. So it's like when inspiration strikes, you just I try to make it as real as possible. And this was inspired by my own kind of experience being married and trying to carve time away from the kids. So I didn't overthink it. Sometimes I said ridiculous things and I just wrote it down. I'm like, that's got to go in the book.
Yeah, no, because I just think it's fascinating, and I think it's extremely relatable. Like that's the other thing too, is that, again, you know, I go back and I mentioned Pat Shand with both Steamy and Cheeky. And obviously you mentioned Matt Hawkins, who I interviewed a long time ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And, you know, I think that there's a desire in comics, and I'm curious how you feel, where people want content that's relatable to them, that's relatable to their life. And I think people are getting sick of DC, Marvel, and some other stuff that's sort of mainstream. And they're like, hey, I want an indie book that has characters that look like me, that think like me, that would make actions like me, that maybe don't have superpowers, but they just want to protect their family. And I think it is something that, and I'm curious how you feel about that, because that's where I'm going. And I gravitate towards stories that are more relatable to me, both in everything that I'm watching. And I'm curious how you feel about that, because I feel there's been a big shift.
I'm not opposed to seeing characters fly around and have superpowers. I think people have gotten very plot driven, especially in today's world where CGI is so easy to make a movie that's like a big spectacle. People want to see big set pieces and big action. And it's true that that's supposed to be secondary to the characters. And and those characters need to be relatable. It doesn't matter if they're an average Joe going to work every day or somebody that's superhero and saving the planet. They need to be relatable. And I'll bring up a show that I'm very impressed with is Superman and Lois. I don't know if you've seen it on the CW.
I haven't seen it yet.
In 3 seasons, I've been very impressed with the way it's grounded Superman. I mean, I like Superman because he's Superman, but I've never been a tremendous fan of him. But in this show, they make him as a father of teenagers. He's dealing with exes. He's dealing with town corruption. He's dealing with like regular, ordinary guy stuff. And to see a guy that is basically a god having to punish his sons for such mundane stuff, it's making this guy that I've never felt related to before relatable. So I've been a big fan of the show for that very reason. It's that some of the greatest scene I saw this season was basically he was talking to cancer patients, and cancer patients were basically relaying their stories to them. And Clark Kent is sitting there with a guy that can never get sick, listening to a regular human talk about like a terrible illness. And he's really listening to them. And it's just made me have a new profound respect for the character that I didn't have before, simply because he was just being like a regular guy.
So to even go further into that too, because that I think is rooted in really good writing and taking risks. And I think that, that's something that obviously, I mean, DC and Marvel, DC's owned by WBD as a corporate company and Marvel's owned by Disney. And obviously it's hard to take risks in corporations. But what is that like for you? Because in indie comics, and certain people are doing a great job, and I think certain people aren't, and we don't have to mention names. Who we all know that some people are just not great writers right now, and they could do a better job. I'm not going to name names. If you want to name names, be my guest. You're more than welcome to. But what is, because I feel like it's lazy writing when people don't develop characters and they don't build them out, and when DC and Marvel don't do it. I feel like it's laziness, because you can make Batman human. I mean, the last time I saw Batman being human was, I think, Death in the Family with Scott Snyder, was when Batman lost his entire Bat family. And I thought it was brilliant, because it's this side that we see of Bruce. And I haven't seen anything since then. What was that? Almost like 8-9 years ago?
It was a while ago.
And so, I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like some people in indie comics are hitting it. I think some people in Marvel and DC are just missing it completely.
I mean, it's scary being an indie comic writer like myself that kind of follows whatever the story and the character takes them, because it's freeing on the one hand in that I don't feel like I have to please anyone. I kind of please myself. And I've written stories that I just knew weren't going to sell well because they were just weird stuff, but I felt so good writing them. And so I just kind of chased my own muse and put out my own books. That sometimes it feels good having that corporate overlord tell you like this isn't going to sell. I mean, you can never be happy. The grass is always greener on the other side. So I would love to put out a book that is extremely bland, that's going to do huge numbers, but I wouldn't be happy doing that. So it's like I'm just never happy. That's the answer.
So let's actually dive into that too, because obviously I run an eBay business and I buy and sell a lot of Bad Girl art covers and a bunch of other stuff. And I have to make constant choices of what I'm going to buy, when I'm going to buy it, and what is going to, sell, and what's going to make me money and what's not. And I constantly have to pick and choose. And obviously I'm trying to make money. So I take risks, but I try to minimize my risks. But also there is a point where I think, and this relates back to comics, where I think if you're a creator, you have to write stories that may or may not sell because that might lead you to the next story that does. And so what is that like to figure out? Because you almost have to challenge yourself. And if this story maybe does okay, but now you've leveled up as a writer, and it becomes a whole tricky thing because it's like you need to gain experience even if it doesn't sell, but then you also need to fund it, and it creates a whole, I guess, quagmire of a problem.
Comics is a long game. Publishing in general is a long game, but comics especially. So I try not to view campaigns and books as isolated incidents. You know, if I have a successful funding on the book and I fulfill a campaign and I have a bunch of books left over, that's added to my back catalog. That's added to my IP catalog, and it's just a foundation, and it's constantly building one upon the other. And you have no idea what's going to happen 3 years from now with a book that you're making today. So it's just about keep moving. You know, it's kind of like Dory and Finding Nemo. You just got to keep swimming. You just got to keep writing. You just got to keep putting out comics, and hope some hit in the moment, some don't hit in the moment. But this book could sell later on. I mean, every book is an add-on for another campaign. So just keep putting out content, and it's I mean, it helps to look back a little bit, but you can't dwell on the past. You learn from it, and you got to learn from it to look towards the future.
So I want to talk about that too, because I think a lot of people sometimes do not understand the business of comics in particular, and even the business of, as you stated, publishing, where
I don't understand the business of comics. I've been doing this for a while, and I learned something. I feel like every time I learn something, there's 2 more things that I don't know. So it's very complicated, very complicated.
And I think you would agree, and feel free to disagree. I think it's gotten even more complicated in the last 3 years.
Yes. There's so many different more avenues. I mean, forget about the whole AI conversation, but there's been an upheaval with Diamond, been an upheaval with Comixology. Things are constantly shifting. Crowdfunding space has become more crowded. Even the I forget what you would call it, but basically the Kickstarter fulfillment services. There've been an explosion of those, and they've become more complicated. It's just become a bigger game, so it's harder to hyper focus what your game plan is going to be when you have so many different options.
And do you also feel that, I mean, because this is my take. I mean, I just had Luke Stone on, who has his thing that he just launched. And obviously, you know, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Crowdfunder, Zoop, Fund My Comic is out there. And, you know, obviously, I think it's safe to say that there's going to be at least 3 or 4 more that are going to be coming in the next 2 years. Easy, conservatively. And obviously, those spaces are getting a lot tighter. And I think there's a lot of money in comics as far as those platforms, but also everybody has a budget. And so what is that like to navigate that? Because if everybody only has $100, it's not that your book is competing against somebody else's book, but it is to some degree at the same time.
That's a huge debate that gets brought up every time a big name jumps on something like Kickstarter. People say that they suck up oxygen in the room on one hand. The other hand, they say that a rising tide raises all ships, and they bring more people to the platform. I really don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of data to really make a determination.
I made the argument that a rising tide raises ships of the same kind, meaning that if there is a supernatural big book that comes, right? So we'll use Boom and Power Rangers. So if you have a book that is similar to Power Rangers and Boom comes on and does Power Rangers, the likelihood of your book getting raised with that Boom vibe is more likely. If you have a vampire crazy book that has nothing to do with Power Rangers, you know, the likelihood of your book getting funded because Boom's on that speed is probably lower.
Could be. I mean, I can see that. It's tough. There are good arguments to make on both sides. I think at the end of the day, you have to stay in your lane. You know, if you're driving on the highway and you're going 100 miles an hour and you start looking at the cars passing you or trees or deer or whatever, you're going to crash, and you kind of just have to stay hyper focused on what you're doing. And the truth is that there's going to be so much competition. There's all these kind of crowdfunders. The best thing you can possibly do is convince people that you're here to stay and why you are going to be better. Not your product is going to be better, but why you are going to be better. And I think I might not have a huge fan base, but for those people that continuously back my campaigns and I hear from them, they say, Frank, I like backing your books because I have no idea what you're going to do next. And that's kind of, I guess that's my shtick, is just kind of jumping around, doing what my heart contends on, and surprising people. So I think if you build a rapport with your fan base, all that other stuff, it's just noise. Just hyper focus with what you're putting out, the people that are reading your stuff, and cross your fingers and hope for the best.
This is interesting that you bring this up, because this is something that, I ran a Kickstarter for this show, and people backed it for two reasons. And I asked, people backed it because they like me, and they believe in what I'm doing, and they want to see it continue, because it is in a lot of ways a service, interviews, and it helps a lot of people. And conversely, people also needed interviews, and people struggle to get interviews, and they're like, well, you're not charging that much, and this is going to guarantee me 4 interviews for the year. And it's kind of a weird thing when you go down that, where people either need this service or and I would imagine with a comic, people either like you as a writer and say, hey, I want to see you write more stuff, or they like the actual concept. And this is, I think, a big debate that's going on sometimes with Kickstarters, that are you there for the person or are you there for the book? Because I've backed both, where I back people because, I'll throw a name out there. I like Travis Gibb. And so I might back a Travis Gibb product because I like Travis, or I like Pat Shand. And, Pat's got a book, cool, I'll back it. But then again, I backed Bigfoot Moonshine, know nothing about the creators, but I thought the concept was brilliant. And so I think it's sometimes both, but I think it's a debate sometimes that's going on.
It's definitely a debate. I mean, there's no right answer. Some people are drawn to a concept. Some people are drawn to the creator. The idea is you get somebody drawn to a concept and then you make them a fan of your own. But since I bounce around so much, I've had people that are one and done. I've had a bunch that are one and done. I've had a bunch that stuck around, and then other people say, you know what? I like Lovecraft and I like monsters, so they back my Pipe Creepers campaign, which was my most successful. And then I haven't seen them since. So they tell me they like the book. They just didn't resonate with any of the other stuff that I put out later. So and you can't really hark on every single person that says stuff like that. You'll drive yourself crazy. So just, you kind of, again, you have to stay in your lane, form a plan, stick to it, and just let all the other stuff pass you by. You can learn from it, but you can't hit the brakes and focus on it that much.
Do you also feel, though, that since you bounce around, that you're hitting every corner, and that you're sort of servicing, I guess, every niche? Because there's also an art to that too, where, I mean, on this show, I play with cosplayers, I play with wrestlers, I play with voice actors, and obviously comic people, and the occasional author, and a few other sectors. And I know for a fact that my theory, and I don't know if this is other people's theories, is that maybe if I could retain 10% from the comic people into the cosplay stuff, and then maybe I could get 10% of the cosplay people into the comic stuff, I'm growing my audience. And I think it's a real interesting position when you sort of, I guess, for lack of a better word, take a shotgun approach to it, where you're trying to hit a bunch of targets and not necessarily stay with one niche. Because
that's never the intent, but it does help a little bit. I try to rope people into my mailing list, which is basically like, look, I don't send out that many emails. I'll let you know the project that I have. If it resonates with you, awesome. If it doesn't, delete it. I'm going to have another one sooner or later. so just that, I mean, it's fine. If you like it, move on. If you like it, back it. If you don't like it, wait for the next one, and then rinse and repeat. So I'm perfectly fine with that. As far as a shotgun approach, again, that's never my intent, but I do like having a wide range of titles, especially now. I mean, 3 years ago, I didn't. But it's cool when I'm talking to somebody and they say you're a comic creator, and they're like, oh, what type of books do you like? I'm like, what do you like? It's kind of like, well, what's your favorite show? You like comedy? I got that. You like horror, action, sci-fi, fantasy, war books? I mean, I like to ask people what they're into, and then rather than just be a horror guy, and they're like, I don't like scary movies, and then it's like, oh, I'm sorry. So
to even go into that too, because the other side, and this is where I think the business thing gets really interesting, is that obviously Kickstarter is one avenue, but then there's obviously the second avenue is cons. And so all of a sudden, if you have 7 titles in 7 different genres and you bring it to a con, and I think you were touching upon this, now somebody comes to your table, and if you only play with one genre, it might be a harder sale if they don't like that genre. But if you have 7 different genres, you could potentially make a sale and then convince somebody, or it gives you more options or more freedom. And so what is that like? Because I know it wasn't intentional, but kind of lines up nicely.
The thing I haven't done cons in a while, but the thing that always aggravated me was, especially when I first started, I was writing books. I mean, it wasn't purposeful, but I had a lot of adult content. It was horror, or it was violence, or whatnot. So if I was at a table, if I had a table and I saw a family walking down Artist Alley with a bunch of kids and they looked a little interested, I'm like, keep going. I don't have anything for you. But now I do have a couple options that I can show them, especially my book Grimspace, which is a sci-fi fairy tale mashup. It wasn't meant for kids, but it has that Star Wars vibe to it, where it's mature, but it's definitely something that a kid could enjoy. So I feel good now that I have that book. A family's walking down. Hey, look, I actually have something for you now. So it is important to be able to pitch different people rather than be the horror guy. But there is pros to that too, to be known for one thing, and it helps you build your brand and name. But that was not the avenue that I chose.
So I mean, you mentioned that you haven't done cons in a while. I haven't done a con in a while either. I had a very bad experience at a con, and then COVID wound up hitting 6 months later, and I haven't been back since. And I think it's almost 4 years now. And so I don't know what the con scene looks like. I don't really have a desire at the moment to go back. And I also don't sell at cons. So, for me, it doesn't work. But what is that like for you? Because obviously that has changed dramatically too, in certain ways.
I struggle doing cons. I have 3 kids. My wife works. It's just hard getting away. 2020 was going to be my year for cons. I signed up for like 5. I did one in January, and then that was it. So, and I had cons too that stole my money and never gave it back for that year. So that which really sucks, because it was COVID and people. It was just a tough thing. It wasn't that expensive of a table, but cons are hit and miss. I think it's a good way to connect with people. It's just, they're just tough to do. Especially, I love it if there's your publisher has a table and you can show up and you don't have to worry about being handicapped to that table. When I have my own table in Artist Alley, it's kind of like, I need somebody to watch my booth so I can go get something to eat. So it gets a little annoying after a while. I'll get back into it eventually, but it's just tough. It's just tough when you're part of a family and have other obligations and stuff.
So let me ask you this, and I don't know if you know this, but I also feel there's other options now to sell your book, between obviously Facebook Live, your own website, Kickstarters, whatnot, potentially retail packaging. And I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of lazy, right? If somebody can sell my book for me, I would much rather that than me having to go to a con in particular, because I just want somebody else to sort of take more risks. I like to use other people's money to make me money.
I'm 100% lazy. I have a little bit of creator ADD where I'm like, okay, I made the book, I run a Kickstarter, I fulfill the Kickstarter, now on to the next book. And I forget that I have this whole stockpile that I got from the Kickstarter I don't know what to do with. So yeah, I love nothing more than to kickstart a book and then to get that book picked up by a publisher afterwards. Now that book has a home. I did my thing with Kickstarter. I recouped my costs. I made a little extra. I got my own stockpile. And now it's with a publisher that feels it's their responsibility to sell it to the direct market. I help with them where I can. But for the most part, that's it. I did my part. Now it's with them, and they can push it out there. And I've done that with a couple books, and I would love to do that with a couple more. And that to me is the game plan.
Yeah, no, I honestly, if I ever do a book, that's kind of what I want to do, because while I'm controlling myself and making more money, there also gets a point of just deploying capital and then having more risk. And I would like somebody else to handle that, because I like to do other things, and it's exhausting to market things. It is exhausting.
The push and pull with that is the more hands that are in the cookie jar, the fewer cookies that are left over for you. So that's why in the beginning I would come up with a pitch package, and I would try to get a publisher involved. But the royalties for direct market are not great. There's so many people that are involved between the publisher, the distributor, the comic shop. So I view the direct market as sort of a second life for a book. Kickstarter is the main life, because it's me. I pay my creative team, and now it's me pushing it, publishing it, getting out there, and there's just a bigger return on investment than if I were to get into the publisher. So the publisher is basically like an extra. It's a cherry on top, is how I view it, especially in terms of exposure. It's not just about the money that you get in the end. It's also about name recognition in the industry.
Yeah. Do you feel that, because I was speaking to somebody, and I don't want to mention who, but he is trying to get into Diamond, or into previews at the very least, because when he's in previews, he makes a lot of money doing store signings, more so than at cons. And so when he gets a book into previews, it opens up revenue and avenues to get into stores. And so it's the exposure is worth more than what he's going to make off of that book. And do you feel that that's sort of what, publishers sometimes do for you, is that, hey, Frank now has a book coming out with so-and-so publisher. It's well respected. Cool. I take Frank more serious now as a writer. And now I don't want to miss when this book comes back out on Kickstarter, or issue 2 comes out on Kickstarter, or Frank's next thing on Kickstarter, because he's been published and picked up by a publisher.
A little bit, which kind of sucks, if people feel like,
I hate to rectify you. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it is true, and it's not limited to comics too. It's limited to the same thing with prose and traditional publishing and novels. People have a little stigma for self-publishing, people that want to put their own books out there, and they don't understand how hard it is to get a book with a publisher. It doesn't matter how good the book is. There's so many other factors that are involved with a publisher picking it up, and between timing, what their release slate is, what their demographics they're trying to hit are, it's just there's just so much going on. So to hear that there are comic shops, I've spoken to some, and they say we don't want to even consider a book unless it's in previews, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But yeah, they're like, we need to have books with a barcode, or they need to be in previews. They need specific things to kind of justify the book's existence. Otherwise, it's just not worth their time, which is just not true. There's plenty of people out there that are busting their ass by themselves. They put out really quality stuff, but since they don't have that publishing logo on the book, it's kind of validates it to say that, hey, this is worthwhile, even though when it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you have enough money, you can form your own publisher and put it in previews and get the same kind of recognition as if it was with a big independent label. So I wish that wasn't the case, but there's some things that you just can't change.
Yeah, no, I don't discriminate. I don't discriminate in my eBay store. I take indie all the time, and I'm getting more and more into it. But I do vet it. I would actually prefer it didn't have a barcode, but that's just me. No, because I want a first print run. I want almost a pre-first print run, where I don't want your book to have a barcode. I want it to be like barcode list, because I think it's more valuable if it winds up getting picked up later on. And that's just how I feel. But that's a different deal completely, and all sorts of fun stuff in that nature. But it's really interesting. And then, it's very, very complicated from what I understand. And I'm not in that space yet. I'm not in that space.
I'm not a speculator, but I have to imagine that if you have an indie Kickstarter print run of a book that eventually gets picked up and made into like a movie with the studio, that's got to be a good investment. So, and I can't think of any examples, but yeah, to get on the ground floor like that with the property and have that book in great condition. I'm not a collector guy or speculator guy, so that's totally a different field than what I'm into.
I would imagine too, but I can't think of something. And I'm in this space. I know certain things have been optioned. I mean, I'm pretty sure Nocturna has been optioned. Scott Snyder, but
I wouldn't count his because he always was going to publish with Image. It was like the book was on Kickstarter and then it was in previews the next week. So I'm thinking like something that was really, really grassroots kind of book.
Agreed. Fair enough. But yeah, I can't think of something. But I know
it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually.
Oh, without a doubt. There's been stuff that has been optioned or has been spoken about. I know that Big Dog Inc. has had stuff that was in discussions at the very least. So it's very possible at this point. I know that Bad Kitty was on Kickstarter and on Indiegogo, and I know it's Dynamite, but I think the books, if it does come to previews, I think the Kickstarter books, if it does become like a television show, will be worth more money.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also sort of an asterisk one. But I digress. This is not what this is about.
What are you talking about? This is about everything.
We could talk about American Pie because I do like American Pie, and your book is like American Pie. It's absolutely great.
It's got that raunchy kind of childish humor. It's weird to consider a book about sex childish humor, but
isn't it really childish in reality, all of it? And isn't it just supposed to be a grand old fun time?
I mean, I guess there's something we never really outgrow that, or at least I don't. That weird private's crude humor. Ha! He said penis.
It's still funny.
I don't know. Maybe I'm childish. Maybe I can't grow up, but that's fun. That's what I make books for. People that have a 5-year-old sense of humor like myself.
So let's actually talk about that too before we dive into rewards. I think this is also why I like your book. And then again, I'm only halfway through, and I've enjoyed the first half so far. But one of the things that I think people have forgotten in comics is that they're supposed to be fun. And I think everybody, I know at least 10 writers who I think have forgotten that. Where they're trying to write serious stories, complicated stories. And I'm like, this isn't fun. I want to escape from hell. My life is complicated. I work a 40-hour work week. I then run a business on the side. My leg hurts, and I'm dealing with stress as it is because life is stressful. And I don't want to read about depressing shit. I'm sorry. I don't want you to paint like the Mona Lisa for me and write your grand tapestry of your comic that you always wanted to write because you want to win a Ringo Award. I could care less about all of that. I want to be entertained if you're going to want to charge me $20 for your book.
I'm guilty of that. I do write books that are extremely depressing or that are supposed to be grand operas. But again, I kind of try to write everything. So I might write one book that's about an alcoholic father, and then now I'm writing a book about a couple that are absolutely terrible at trying to pleasure each other. So this was definitely a fun book to write. It was also a fun book to just produce, just to go back with layouts and thumbnails and deal with the artist. I'm like, his facial expression, it doesn't look ridiculous enough. She's like, no, when he's inside her, they have to meet eyeline. So it was just there were so many times where I'm just looking at pages. There's no lettering on it. I'm just looking at the art and I'm just laughing to myself. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done, but I'm having a blast with it because it's fun. It was an all around fun book.
See, did you think though that that's why you're over 40% on day one? And the likelihood of this book funding is very high at this point. And it is fun. I mean, in the production of it, the writing of it, the layouts, and obviously when somebody says, "Oh, sex night," and then they sort of read the tagline a little bit, they get that sense of fun. And I think people are craving it. And I think people gravitate towards fun books because I think there's also a lack of that, where this doesn't pretend that this book is not going to make you, think or be thought provoking. It's just going to be entertaining, in my opinion, at the very least.
Maybe I'm not that sophisticated to try to think about what people want and what they don't want. I'm like the Joker in Dark Knight. I just do things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. For me, this was a book that I had an idea for, and it seemed like fun, and it seemed different and unique, and so I just kind of took it and ran with it. I wasn't really thinking that much about how it was going to respond. I was curious how people would respond, but it wasn't like I was thinking, should I do this book because I don't think people will like it. I never do that, which is kind of weird. I should probably do that. I'm selling books. But no, I make the book because I would like it. And I cross my fingers and hope that other people like it too. That's all this is. It's a big guessing game. I'm not some wizard that can just make books and people buy it.
I'll be very honest. I don't. So people say, "Oh, if you're a podcast, you should listen to your audience." I don't listen to my audience. I understand sometimes what my audience wants, but I've also interviewed some of the best people in the world at what they do, and nobody knew who they were, and my audience wouldn't have been the ones who recommended them. And so, to me, a lot of the time, if I like a guest, I'm like, cool, I like this person, I like what they're doing, and hopefully my audience likes them. And hopefully it's going to work out fine. And I think for the most part it does. And I think, that's kind of where it's at. But my audience doesn't really play an input into it. I just say, cool, this person has an interesting book. They're an interesting cosplayer. They're an interesting voice actor. They're an interesting wrestler. Cool, let's run with it and see what happens. And I hope for the best. And that's where I'm at. So
I definitely feel that. I mean, I listen to the audience a little bit. I like to hear feedback. A lot of people say, don't listen to bad feedback. Be like, I'm fine if you want to tell me you didn't like the book. I want to hear why you didn't like it. Not that I'm going to put much stock in it or use it for like subsequent books, but I may not. But I just like hearing what people have to say. And I'll give you a good example. My book, I had a book called Macabre Motel. It was a one shot. People liked it. It was kind of a weird horror book. And everybody all asked me, you left on such a cliffhanger. Are you going to do a follow-up? And for years, I was kind of like, I never intended to do a follow-up. It was people want it. People asked about it, but it was never on my radar until one day an actual idea for a sequel popped into my head. And I'm like, I like this idea. People want this book. I think I'm going to make it. So I don't listen to people. Oh, I should say I listen to them, but I never 100% follow what they want. It has to vibe. We have to vibe together, be based on what I want, based on what they want. And if what they want is not what I want, I don't care. I shouldn't say I don't care. That's terrible. I'm not gonna do something that I'm not passionate about just to make other people happy.
Yeah, no, the way I deal with feedback is I look at who's saying it, what they're saying, if it's an actual fair point. So if somebody says, Andrew, I don't like the color of your background. Well, this is a wall and I'm not about to paint it. So I'm sorry to say you're going to have to deal with that. Or somebody says, I don't like you have a window there. Well, that's a real window. And I'm not about to cover up my window for you. But as soon as it says, hey, I wish that you asked a little bit more technical question, or, hey, I wanted to know about this character and this thing. So I say, you got a fair point. Or somebody says, Andrew, you were speaking too much in the interview. I listen, and sometimes I make a mistake. Sometimes I make a bad call in an interview. It happens. But it's also coming from how it's said too. where somebody said you could say something nicely to somebody and it's constructive, or you could say something, I just didn't like the interview. I thought you did a shitty job with that interview, man. Well, that's not telling me much.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that one. It's not so much it's about how you say it. It's about how you approach it. You just don't be a dick. It's kind of it's kind of where it goes. I mean, if you didn't like something, you need to have justifiable reasons for not liking it, and you communicate those justifiable reasons in a respectable manner. That's it. That's kind of
somebody gave me really constructive feedback, and I'm like, you know what? He made a really good point. Where I overspoke in an interview. It happened. I made a bad call, but then I watched another. He's like, "Oh, dude, you did a good job with that one." So, and I said, "Yeah, you got a fair point." And things happen sometimes.
I work with a lot of editors, and I feel like the best editors give you feedback that you already know to be true, but you just didn't want to believe it. So there are a lot of times when you get constructive feedback on something, you're like, I know, you're right. It's like things that you already know. You're not telling me something I don't know, but I've just been avoiding having to deal with that. So the fact that you put it in my face, that other people are seeing this flaw too, it's helpful.
Agreed. But also, it was the person who said it, because the person who said it usually doesn't say anything to me. And they didn't say it meanly. They just said, should have let her told the story. I'm like, you got a point. Made a bad call. And then it happens. But I digress. I definitely want to back out. I want to talk about rewards, because I know you have a digital, a standard cover, the theme song with, I think, the standard cover. I think you got a variant, a wraparound.
This group of covers might be my favorite covers that I've done so far in a project. I had a lot of fun with these. So the first cover is, I had like an image of what it was. It's basically the husband and wife in bed. And it's from the point of view from the child as he's entering the room, and they're like mid-coitus, and they just like So that's the standard cover. That's fun. The second cover, my variant cover, is my favorite cover that I've done yet for a book. And again, I wanted to play off that sex nature of comics, where women are just flaunting their chest to sell books. So I have the wife flashing everybody, and the husband's going crazy, and they're talking about they're using word balloons to saying, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm showing my boobs. And the word balloons are covering up her chest. So it's kind of like a censor kind of thing. That's my favorite cover I've ever done. That's the variant. And then the wraparound cover is just ridiculous. I look at this cover and I just laugh. So the front cover is of it's straight on close-ups of the husband and wife and their O face, their climax face. Yeah, so the wife looks all sexy and erotic, and the husband looks like an idiot, and he's just making an absolute ridiculous face. And I can't. So this is what I'm talking about. I had a good time with this book because the artist did a sketch of it and he brought it back. I'm like, no, he needs to look more absurd. He needs to look more like an idiot. And so I look at this and I just laugh to myself because it looks so dumb. And I think that emanates how fun this book is because it just looks that silly and ridiculous.
And then I think is there a fourth one too that's an add-on?
So the add-on is basically the variant with the girl flashing her chest, but it's a virgin not safe for work variant. So I gave in. I've never done a nudie cover before, but I figure if I'm going to do one, it has to be on this book. So it's a limited add-on of 20 copies. I think like they've already 6 of them are already gone or something like that. So yeah, that's the fourth one. It's an add-on only, so you better hurry if you want it.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, what is this like to have a limited 20? Because I'm a collector, I'm a reseller, I like making money, and let's be realistic here. Anything that is limited to 50 or less on certain books will sell out, and it's desirable. And once it sells out, I mean, secondary market is nice, and it's good. It's good when a book fetches money outside of Kickstarter and fetches more because it adds validity to it.
I wanted to limit it for a couple of reasons. That's number one, is that when it's limited, it becomes more valuable. But also, that's not what this book is about. You know, I go out of my way to make sure that this book does not have nudity within the book itself. So I didn't want this book to be about the nude cover of this girl flashing everybody. I wanted it to be about the comedy and about the relationships. So I wanted to keep that aspect of the campaign contained, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because I mean, look, I'm a Zenescope guy, and I love Bad Girl art, and I appreciate those covers. But I also, when I get a cover A, I expect the cover A to be what's on cover A is what's in the book.
Yeah,
and I expect that style. Not it doesn't have to be perfectly that style, but that's what I expect. And it drives me mad when you sell me a cover and then I get something else that's different in the book. It's kind of a weird thing for me, and it's a pet peeve of mine.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. So, yeah, this is not a booby book. Do not expect boobies. You will be disappointed. Even though it's a book called Sex Night, there are no boobs. I know that might seem weird, but married sex is weird. What can I say?
It's like the first time I'm out of words. I'm out of words. So many things I could say. So many of them are inappropriate. But I'm gonna just move on. You have a short story commission, you have a digital art commission, you have a combination of both. I know you also you could produce a short digital comic with the team that's in there that's 5 pages, which is cool. And I'm pretty sure if somebody wanted to print it, there wouldn't be an issue on their dime for them to print it and have a good time with it.
Yeah, those top tiers, I typically have the same for every campaign. I don't overcomplicate things. And a couple of people have grabbed the producer short comic over the course of a couple of years, which is fun. I love making comics. So the fact that I get to work with people to bring their own story to life is fascinating. I'm also like really humbled by a lot of people's compliments. They're like, I have no idea how you could take my idea and turn it into a comic. I'm like, okay, I do this every single day. That's not that special, but thank you very much. So,
did you also feel though that because I'm in the middle of producing or writing something and it's going very slow just because I've had a busy month. And I haven't really sat down and written, and I'm not motivated to write it at the moment. But it is hard to write and produce stories, and some people are good at it. And some people say, "Look, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start." And maybe they need a little bit of a starter, and they want somebody to sort of hold their hand a little bit to do something like this. And to me, that's what this is. Especially if you say, "Look, I want to do this, but I just want a good starting point," because this is kind of what that is. Or somebody says, "Look, I got a 5-page idea, and I just want to get this thing done because I'm a fan and I want to be part of it."
To me, what I love about making comics, writing, it's the challenge of it. The working with someone who says, "I'm a terrible writer. I have this idea. It's very rough. I want you to turn this into a comic." It's a puzzle. It's a problem that I have to solve. And I love that challenge of solving that puzzle and making the person happy with the way I solve the puzzle. It's just enjoyable for me. So I love tinkering with characters and plots and coming up with some sort of functioning story and script and then artwork and then showing and saying, "Look, that idea you had that you had no idea what to do, this is what we made with it. Do you like it?" And so far, people have always been blown away with the results, which it's a fun process and it's a fun to see their reaction at the end. So it doesn't get better than that.
No, I think it's smart. I think it's smart, and I think more people should do it. I really do. But
and I mean, a lot of times people look at the price tag, and I'm like, look, if you try to do this on your own, that's how much it's going to cost anyway. It's just the name of the game. You can't hire an artist for cheap. It just doesn't. It's not going to work. You can probably find somebody if you look long enough, but it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. Trust me. You want a professional, somebody that you're paying to do this, and it's going to do the best job possible and in a timely manner.
It's tricky. It's tricky. I am nowhere near there. I am nowhere near that stage. So I'm not even going to worry about that on my end as far as that. And I will cross that bridge when I get there. on everything that I am doing. But I digress right there. Obviously, I do want to back out of your rewards. I'm sure there are other add-ons too. I'm pretty sure you can get your back catalog, what you have left. And I'm sure that
I try not to put every book I have on every single campaign. So there are some that are available.
How dare you?
Well, I don't do that because I don't want to just be like, everything is available every single time. I got to hold a little back. And this one's tricky because I try to, if I have a horror book, I try to put horror books up there, a sci-fi book. I don't really have any other sex comedy books. So I had to work a little hard.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
I'm going to have a whole sex comedy line now of nothing but just people failing at trying to get it on. Get it off. That's going to be the next book.
I have your spinoff. It went right this time. And then I have the third installment. Oh no, we're having a baby.
Oh no, that's the terrible one. Trying to have sex with a pregnant wife. That comic's going to write itself. That's going to be the name. That's going to be the title. Not trying to have a threesome. When is the threesome not a threesome?
Oh boy, my sponsorship with Rob is going to come to an end. Good thing his thing is done on Thursday. Thank God. I could have messed up that Kickstarter with any of my sponsorships because he was doing plenty fine without my help. But I will take all the credit for anything that was beyond. No, he was doing great. Very thankful for my sponsorship with him. But anyway, I digress. Yes, it'll write itself. I could write that book. Easy. And I'm a bad writer, so even better. But I do want to back out of all of this, and I do want to ask you where the industry is going, because obviously you've done a lot of stuff. You've written in pretty much every genre at this point. You've played around a lot in Kickstarter, and I feel the industry is complicated right now. And I buy and sell a lot of books, and I'm realizing how complicated it is. And I'm going through an expansion in my eBay comic book side. And I find it difficult, and I'm not a producer. So I'm curious how you feel about everything that's sort of going on, because, and maybe I'm jaded. I don't know. Maybe it's easier, and maybe I hyper conflated the whole thing. But to me, it seems very tricky lately.
I hate this question. I hate when people ask this question because every time I answer it, it's a terrible answer. I have no idea.
That's fine. That's fine.
I have no idea where the industry is. I've given answers in the past, and they've always turned out to be wrong. And I try not to focus on the bigger picture.
So as somebody who buys and sells comics as my side hustle on eBay, and I'm obviously doing 5-figure numbers in my eBay store, I find that there's just a lot of good material out there, and there's a lot of good stuff both in the indie sector that does well sometimes, and also in the variant sector. And it's just tricky because I'm going through testing right now on what SKUs work, and it's stressful because some of it's working, and then some of it's not working, and then some of it's working within the SKU that I'm testing, but then half the SKU is not working. And I'm like, what's going on?
It's all over the place. I mean,
and so it's like, it's very much a shotgun approach, and it's beyond stressful because I'm 2 months into testing, and for me, testing is a 6-month process, and it's probably a $2,000 process when I'm said and done. So at the end of the 6 months, I'm gonna have my data that I want, and it's a small business price to pay in the long run. But it's also very stressful, and that's why I asked this question, because I know it from my side, or I'm going to know it in the next 3 to 4 months. But I'm very curious from the creator side. And if you don't know, I mean, that's fine too, because again, to me, it just seems there's so many moving parts.
I could tell you what I don't like, and I'm not a fan of I would guess we would call, so there's 2 different markets. There's the storytelling market, where people want to buy your book to read it because they love comics and they love reading. And then there's the collector market, which you're selling variants, you're selling metal covers and foil covers. And I play around a little bit of that with my campaign. But I feel like as a creator, that's an unsustainable business model. I mean, sure, you can put out a book with a ton of variants, you make a bunch of bank on it, and it's great. But at that point, you have entered a different business. You're no longer selling a comic, you're selling a collectible. And collectibles are all the same. Doesn't matter if they're pops, if they're action figures or comics. And I don't understand collectible markets. I don't want to be a person that's dealing collectibles. I want to be a creator that sells books. And so I'm just not a fan of taking that approach. I try to shy away from it. I don't know if it's a bubble that's going to burst because there's just so many damn variants. And you see Marvel and DC are chasing that too. It's just an area that I don't personally want to touch with the way that I put books out. If I'm working with a publisher and they want to do that, that's a different story. But for my campaigns, I have 2 variants for this book. And they're fun, they're goofy, they're ridiculous, and I had a good time with them. But I didn't put them out there to try to have a ton of different variants to try to like have a big bundle that to try to ramp up my funding. I don't take that approach.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. I mean, it's my business, and that's a whole different discussion. But I am expecting, and I've been very honest, where there's a reason why I take a distribution out of my business. Because there will get to a point where this does burst. Whether it's tomorrow or it's 10 years from now, there will be a point where this takes a nosedive. And it has. It has. I mean, there's no question about it that it has taken a nosedive. A few months ago, it was rough. It's gotten better in the last few months, but a few months ago, it was hard to sell variants for prices above what you paid for them. So it's tricky, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
It's comics, but at the same time, it's a different type of comics. It's not what I'm dealing with.
It's a stock to me. I'll prove a point. This is not a comic. This is not a comic to me. This is a stock. This is an $80 book. So it costs $15. That's a stock. It's not a comic anymore. It's a commodity. It's a tradable cash equivalent asset. This, on the other hand, is a baseball card. That is a baseball card. So there's a difference between those two. And there you go. So, not the point. This is a Dr. Pepper. I am drinking it. Just want to make that crystal clear. But I digress on that. We've been speaking for a little over an hour. I do want to give you a chance to self-promote yourself, where can people find you, bother you, hit you up, back the campaign, obviously get you further funded along, because day ones, week ones are important. So all that fun stuff.
This is me, this name, at Frank the Writer. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find me on there under that handle. My website is also frankthewriter.com. And if you happen to venture on any one of those 4 things, you will find a link to the Sex Night Kickstarter. Or you could Google Sex Night on Kickstarter, because typing in sex into a search engine is always it's an A+ tactic.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better myself, and I've been saying it multiple times for almost 4 years now. You have to support indie. And what that means is that when people have Kickstarters going on and you like what they're writing, producing, getting out there, you need to back it, because it makes a big difference. And obviously, as you back people's Kickstarters, the book gets funded and they produce the book, and they're going to produce more of that content or more content in general. And that's how you get stuff produced. And it's a very important thing to do. Furthermore, if you miss it and they're at a con, or they have a web store, or it's in a publisher, or however else you want to do it or get it, or you reach out to them, buying their books also is very efficient as well. Or even if this is not your cup of tea and they have another book that you like, buying that book also helps to directly fund that book or indirectly fund this book as well. So that makes a huge difference, as well as following people on social media. As far as I'm concerned, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Please subscribe to all of that. It's not that hard. All you have to do is type in Pop Anime Comics, and a bunch of stuff will pop up. I have almost 500 interviews now on YouTube, And so there's an interview for everybody on YouTube. So if you want to be entertained and entertained for ages, there you go. That's the thing. As well as I do have a variety of other stuff. I have Buy Me a Coffee if you like to support it in the media. I have my ad stuff that you can also, if you like to advertise on my show and all that fun stuff, and all that cool stuff. So if you're interested in all that, everybody, you can check that out. It's in the description up above, down below to the side, wherever else you want to check out all my links, as well as the link to the campaign is in the description as well. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Have sex. That was terrible. Enjoy sex night. I hope you like it because I had a blast making it, and it's a very fun book. It's a unique book. It's a different book, and unless you are an abstinent priest, I think you will like it.
I don't think I could have said that any better. And everybody, that is a